Good evening, everyone. I'm Diane Gordon. I'm going to be moderating tonight. Did you like what you just saw, Flesh and Bone? Terrific show, isn't it? An intense drama. And I've seen a little more than you saw tonight, and it only gets better. So let's get started. First, you saw her as Daphne in the show. Please welcome Raychel Diane Weiner. And as Romeo, an unusual fellow, please welcome Damon Herriman. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Both. Well, let's start out because as I was saying to you when we said hello earlier, I'm really intrigued because a relative newbie to the business, not to the dance business, but to acting, and a veteran. Because you've been acting since what, age 8, 9, something like that?
Yeah, so it's 10 years ago, yeah.
So, Raychel, what I'm wondering for you is it difficult when your day job of dancing becomes your on-screen job?
I mean, it was a difficult transition just because the normal day-to-day for me was 6 to 8 hours of strictly ballet. I never had to open my mouth. I just showed up, I expressed myself physically, and so bringing the dance on to the screen and not having the amount of time to really tell a story with our bodies, because there was so much more to each story, was kind of hard to navigate at first, because I knew I only got a split second to show a dance move and explain what was going on in the room. But yeah.
So when you got cast, how did you approach the role? Especially because Daphne does things like, she also happens to work at a strip club for part of the time.
Yeah.
In addition to her day job of dancing in a company. How did you approach the role when you got it?
I mean, with Daphne, she's just too cool for school. And so I wanted to make sure that carried through, that kind of I don't give a shit, mentality. And carrying that into the stripping, because though Daphne is clearly very sexual, and so that was something that was really fun to explore. It's not overt. Yes, it's overt because she's stripping, but she doesn't expose her private life really behind her apartment doors, and so it was preparing to kind of expose, but then keep really guarded at the same time. And each episode, it was a learning process. And I had a lot of help because I was brand new to the industry. So Moira and the producers and writers were incredibly helpful.
Okay. And Damon, for you, when you got this script, what did you think when you first read the role of Romeo?
I thought, what a gift role for an actor. It was, I couldn't believe I had an audition for this role, to be honest. I just, was reading the audition scenes. I think the audition scenes were from a couple of the episodes. They weren't all from the first episode, but... and they were just all these incredible acting scenes, and you read this character breakdown about this guy and about what ends up happening to him later on in the series, and the fact that he's suffering from schizophrenia, and it was kind of scary, but also an exhilarating feeling to know that you were going to get to have an audition for this, and it was definitely one of the best career phone calls I've ever got. When I found out I got the role, I was pretty over the moon. Yeah, couldn't believe it.
And I have to ask, just because I think a lot of people in here are probably also familiar with you from your role on Justified as Dewey Crow, and this role just couldn't
One
be
person.
more. this role couldn't be more different. And my other question is, does Romeo become sort of a Greek chorus in the show? Even though I know he's schizophrenic, but it's just his perpetual presence. I was just wondering. Can I ask that without asking for spoilers?
It's hard to say much about what happens with Romeo without giving too much away, because the I guess the bulk of Romeo's stuff. I mean, he pops up in every episode, but the bulk of his stuff is in episodes 7 and 8, and it really.
Then no spoilers.
Yeah, in case you do see the rest of it, I don't want to give too much away, but it is an incredible journey that the character goes on. He certainly his connection, friendship, obsession with Claire definitely grows, and even more so when she I mean, it's not giving too much away. In the next episode, he meets Brian, her brother, and that only amplifies the connection that he feels he has with Claire and now with her brother. And you know, that book that he's borrowed comes into it. He's writing his own book. It's all these prophecies. I mean, it gets pretty intense.
Yeah, well, he's an intense guy. In general, he's an intense guy.
Yeah.
So this is so Raychel, this is your first, SAG, your first union job, correct?
It's my first acting job ever.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
I mean, the thing about pretty much all the dancers in the show is that, well, a good chunk of them had never acted. Sarah, the lead girl, had also never acted before. Yeah, it's kind of puts the rest of us to shame a bit when you see people just turn up and do that, having never done it before.
Well, and I know you said you've had a lot of guidance from Moira Wally-Beckett and from your fellow cast members and producers.
Absolutely, yeah.
What do you feel was the biggest ongoing challenge during the first season? What was hardest for you?
I mean, like I said earlier, I'm so used to expressing myself physically, so just using my words was a really interesting thing.
Okay.
But ironically, it was the opposite that was more difficult, where when I was speaking in a scene, all of a sudden it was like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I was like, and then Moira would say, well, how would you say this? Like I'm doing now. And I was like, well, I don't know, because I'm not saying it. Daphne's saying, I was like, I don't know what to do. And
that never goes away, that thing about not knowing what to do with your hands. Well, that never goes away.
But, I mean, I learned so much just from watching actors like Damon and Ben Daniels and being in the room with like Tina Banco. And because ballet is such a visual learning experience, or it was for me, that's really what helped tremendously. It was just watching the little nuances that they were doing. And I asked a ton of questions. I was probably the most obnoxious one on set. Why are you doing that?
Was there a particular piece of advice that you got from any of your fellow actors or from, the director or the producers that sort of really kind of did it for you and maybe something clicked?
We were supplied with a brilliant acting coach, Andrea Siri, who has remained my coach and friend. And her big thing was listen. Listen to everything that someone is saying, process it. Even though you know the answer, listen every take, and it helped tremendously.
That makes sense. That
Yep.
helps in life too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
In general.
Yeah.
So, and Damon, as you were tackling the role of Romeo, what were the greatest challenges for you?
I guess a couple of things. I mean, one was just doing justice to a character that has schizophrenia, even though it's never actually said in the show. That's what Moira had told me, and she had been inspired by someone that is close to her, who suffers from schizophrenia. So she to come up with the character of Romeo. So I definitely felt an obligation to not, get it horribly wrong. Do my best to not get it horribly wrong. And also just, I guess, the type of stuff that Romeo said, like it's not just the fact that he's schizophrenic and wanting to get that right, and obviously you read a lot about it and watch as much as you can on YouTube and documentaries and so forth. But also just, probably the other challenge is just the Romeo dialogue is not typical dialogue, perhaps even for schizophrenics. It's a really unusual way of speaking, and he says things that yeah, you know, it's sometimes tough to say. You know, as an actor, sometimes you would read a line and go, how am I going to make that work? So it was, yeah, there were a couple of challenges there.
Okay. And, you know, when you were growing up in Australia, as I said earlier, you started working at a very young age, and you worked on a lot of Australian television, and then when you came to America, both features and television. So when you were growing up and working in Australia, who did you learn your good habits from, or who did you get advice from when you were coming up as an actor?
I guess just you just pick stuff up from select actors that you happen to be working with. You know, I didn't train anywhere, but I definitely, you know, I think working on the job is a great way to train as an actor, especially as a kid, and you know, being inspired by great performances in movies. You know, I remember very clearly the first time I saw The Elephant Man, and as brilliant as John Hurt is in that film, I was just mesmerised by Anthony Hopkins. I don't think I'd seen him in anything before, and it was the first time I remember seeing an actor and trying to. I couldn't work out how he didn't seem to be acting at all. He just was the doctor, and I saw the film again. I was only 11 or something, but I was just I was definitely very inspired by him early on. So I don't know. I guess a mix of people, lots of Australian actors that I would have worked with back in the day. Yeah.
Well, you worked with one of my current favorites, Ben Mendelsohn.
Ben Mendelsohn is the best actor Australia has ever produced, I think. In my opinion, I think he's a genius. I don't know if you guys know who Ben Mendelsohn is. He's some Australians up the back who know who he is. He's the kind of crazy brother in Bloodline, if you've seen that, and he was nominated for an Emmy for that.
You say crazy like it's bad.
Yeah. And he's now he's in everything. He's
turning up in a lot of movies.
Yeah, if you IMDb him, you'll probably go, oh, that guy, because he's had an incredible career, because he was the guy that got cast in every Australian film in sort of late 80s to mid to late 90s, and then for some reason just didn't work so much in the 2000s, and that could have just stayed that way. And then he did an Australian film called Animal Kingdom, which is the same director as the first episode of this, David Michaud. And because that film, you know, was a bit of an industry hit, I guess, over here, that skyrocketed his career and Jackie Weaver's, and reignited Joel Edgerton's and Sullivan Stapleton. I mean, that film did a lot for a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah. So Raychel, outside of specific advice from your coworkers, what's been the biggest surprise you got while working on the show?
I mean, it was all a bit of a surprise to me. I guess the biggest surprise from working on the show was just how much I enjoyed it. It was just so terrifying to me. You know, I mean, I came into it, acting was something that I was always interested in, but you don't walk away from a ballet career, because once you walk away, you're pretty much not getting back in. And so, yeah, I mean,
You're still a principal dancer with a company, though, correct?
I am, with a very small contemporary company in San Francisco. I'm very lucky that I still get to roll around on the floor a little bit. But a classical ballet company, walking back in and trying to compete with those other girls, you know, I mean, I'm 28 years old and I am old in the ballet world. There's 18-year-olds that want my job, and they got it, so. Well,
the show makes it very clear how brutal a profession it is. Just literally from like minute one, you watch the show and it just does not seem like a pleasant career at all. I'm still trying. Seriously, I've watched 3 episodes. I'm trying to figure out what you guys enjoy about it.
I mean, of course, you know, this is a drama for television,
right?
And we have it is an incredibly enjoyable career, but it is.
I mean, it's gorgeous to watch.
Yes,
but that's pleasure we get. I mean,
it's a lot of. I mean, a lot of what you saw, there's a grain of truth to all of that. You know, we are the most critical and you know, we don't self-mutilate in the way of like ripping toenails off and painting lips with blood and things like that. But
Good
but,
to know.
you know, I mean, you don't report an injury. If you're injured, and I've danced through terrible injuries until finally I now have to take a year off because I didn't want to lose a part. Or I didn't want, you know, The Apprentice to get my role. Because, you know, once I say, oh, this hurts and I have to take 3 weeks off, well, that's it. And then for the next show, because I didn't get seen on stage, I may not get a part in the next one. You know, it's real. And unfortunately, with the lack of support for the arts, of course, you have companies in New York that are very well supported, but throughout the rest of the U.S., you know, those contracts are few and far between, and you are not making a lot of money. You are working on the side, not always stripping. I know dancers that go dance and things like that, but not to that extent. You know, so once you get a job, you hold on tight, and it's pretty brutal, but it's a lot of fun. And my fellow dancers were always my best friends and still are, and we're, you know, so tightly wound that we end up acting like 2-year-olds usually in the studio, which we did in between takes on the show as well.
And with the show, since you've done the show, so is this it? Are you just going to focus on acting now?
That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah, I told myself I was retiring, which I was planning on doing prior to the show, just from old injuries. Sad that I had to retire before 30, but you know, I have arthritis in my hips, which I've had since I was 23, and just, you know, I'm 80 years old essentially. But I mean, I will always be Raychel the dancer. That's who I identify with. That's what I've known for my entire life. I don't think I'll ever be able to put to death dance. But as far as putting point shoes on, no thank you, I'm good.
Wow.
So.
And would it be correct to assume that dance will always be part of your life, no matter what else you do?
No matter what. It's really the only form of physical activity I understand, because running is like Chinese to me. I don't know which arm to put forward, and
Again, we're back to what do you do with your hands?
I never know what to do with my hands, ever. Yeah, so yoga requires too much breathing, and, you know, it's like, I go to ballet class, that I know, and yeah.
And Damon, has this inspired you to dance? I just have to ask.
God, no. No, I mean, it's definitely inspired me not to dance. No, it's very hard watching this version of the ballet world to see why you'd be inspired to take it up. It just seems like incredibly hard work. Like the emotional and physical toll is so huge. But I guess the joy of doing it is bigger.
It's for costumes and tiaras and dance with cute boys. And it's fun.
And since I've only seen the first 3, and just for everyone here, do we see more with the male dancers? I mean, or are we concentrating mostly? I know it concentrates mostly on, you know, the lead, and then, you know, you guys. But I was just curious because you have some fantastic male dancers in the show as well.
We have, and the company men, and most of them unfortunately don't speak ever, but their resumes are insane. I mean, some of the most brilliant dancers, and I couldn't believe I was in the room with them. And you will get to see quite a bit more of them.
Oh, okay.
Ethan Stiefel choreographed
Right.
a piece that eventually you'll see, and being
Yes, from center stage, in case we have some center stage
Mr.
fanatics here.
Cooper Nielsen.
And Sasha Radetsky.
And I mean, yeah, Sasha is gorgeous and gorgeous, and both. But, you know, Ethan being such a famous male dancer, he definitely tends to choreograph more towards, you know, the male ability. So when you see the full ballet, the men are definitely
Okay.
featured, and they look incredible, and they're shirtless, so. Everyone will be happy.
Very nice, very nice. And Damon, after this, I mean, I'm sure doing this show. What's coming down the pike for you? Is there more movie work for you, or?
Since doing Flesh and Bone, I did an Australian film with a guy back there called Lincoln Eunice, Australian film called Down Under, which is hopefully going to come out over here at some point. It hasn't been released in Australia yet. And I did a show for Cinemax called Quarry, which is a really, really cool drama. First season's 8 episodes, and then looking like it's going to go for a second, but we don't know yet. And that's set in 1972 in Memphis, and it's some pretty incredible writing. It's written by the guys who wrote on a show called Rectify. I don't know if you've seen that show, but it's really cool. A really cool show. And that's it. That's it at the moment.
That's a lot. Okay. Just wondering about that. Wow. You've been keeping busy. And over the course of your career, was there one piece of advice that you got that meant a lot to you that you would share with everyone here?
Well, I could give a bit. There's a piece of advice that I learnt on this show, actually. So I guess, and seeing as this is a SAG audience, it's probably worth sharing this. I was so close to not getting this role, and it's, I don't know if you know this story, but I found out after getting the role that that I was actually, I got the role just from self-tapes in my living room, and I did one, and it turns out, and then I did another one, and then got the role. But it turns out that after the first one, I was on the no pile. I was in the thank you very much, see you later pile. I was never to be looked at again, and it just was luck that. So as it turns out, the version of Romeo that I did, because you know what it's like, you're kind of taking a stab in the dark a lot of the time. You're basing an audition, if there's no one there to give you any feedback, you're basing it on what's in the script and the little kind of breakdown of the character, but you don't really know if you're doing what they've got in their head. So I did my audition, no thanks, terrible, wrong, and I found out later that the reason I'm trying to work out the best way to tell this story. So it turns out that the director of the first episode, because he knew my work, said to Moira and Starz, you should give this guy some notes and get him to do it again. And that was him saying that is the only reason I'm in this show, because I was 100% not in this show based on my first audition. Wouldn't have known any different. And it just goes to show you that, you often, before that experience, you don't get a role and you think I was either bad or I didn't look right. But it could just be that the version that you gave them was not the version they wanted, and they didn't give you the opportunity to show them the version that they wanted. And, that really struck me with that experience, going from, not even a callback, not even worth a callback, to one callback and then getting the job. The notes was the only thing that made the difference. And
wow.
So I don't know what the moral of that story is. It just to make people give you notes or something. I don't know, but I think it definitely makes me more inclined to want to know if you're not in the room with someone who can give you feedback or adjustments. I think, it's probably worth finding out. Is there something? Is it physical? Were you just bad, or is there actually, Because I think sometimes they just think you only have one version of a character. That whatever you did is the way you would do it, and that's how you do it, and you won't do it any differently. And they don't often think about the fact that we're actors and we can do a couple of variations. Anyway.
And not everybody gets that opportunity to adjust, especially when you're putting yourself on tape for a role. So that's very difficult.
Yeah, I was just very lucky in that situation.
So Raychel, did you audition? Was it like an open call for dancers? How did that happen for you?
I was dancing in Arizona, and I got an email from a friend that somehow came across this breakdown and said, you'd be perfect for this. And I looked at it and I went, okay. Because in my mind, it was untitled ballet drama, and I was like, ugh, I didn't want to stand in the background and wave a rose, because that's what I thought it was going to be. And so I just kind of ignored it, and then I got an email from Telsey and Company
Bernie
based
Telsey
on
in New York.
yes, based on my ballet headshot, and which I had a mohawk, and apparently they don't see. I still do. I just hide it. They don't see many ballerinas with mohawks, and that fit Daphne pretty well, I guess. So I happened to have time off from ballet, and I went to San Francisco, and I read for. I'm not sure who I read with. I've never seen her again. And I read directly into camera because I've never auditioned before. And I walked in and out of frame. And no one told me any different. She didn't say anything.
So no direction.
No, she's like, okay, I'm going to have you slate. And I looked at her and I was like, what's that? I don't know. She, name, height, and where you dance. And I gave her my whole damn resume, because I just didn't know any better. And then it was a lot of fun, and I thought, well, I think she liked me, but she was nice to me because I clearly didn't know. And a few weeks later, I got a call, and I went out to New York for producer calls. And
wow,
yeah, that was intense because I was then pulled in with the open call group. So there was my first day. I think there was about 1,500 girls. After being cut from thousands from an open call. I mean, it was very much kind of like the audition scene, which isn't necessarily typical for most company auditions. You're not cut just, based on you standing there all of the time. It's happened before. But this one, you walked in, you had 2 minutes to show them you could do something, and you were out of the room. And then if you were lucky enough to stay, you were there for 10 hours, which was a lot of fun.
Whoa.
So it was a long first day. Yeah.
I'm always amazed at how much the show really hews to a lot of what is real as part of a dancer's world.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole point of kind of, branching out and trying to grab girls from ballet companies is just to keep the authenticity. And Moira and all of the writers were very adamant about asking us questions throughout the process. Would you do this? Would you wear this? How would you, say this, whatever it was, because we use a different dialogue, it seemed, which, I'd never noticed before. But reading something in a script and being like, I would never word that in that way, and it was ballet lingo. But, I mean, there's a lot of truth in the process, especially that you see in the show. It definitely was a reality for me getting the part, that kind of an audition scenario. But, yeah.
That just sounds horribly intimidating. More so than your average audition.
Well, yeah, the first day was all dance, and then the second day was all acting, so that was the scary part. And they had a dancer and an actor version for each character that they kept around. But the actor had to keep up in the ballet classes, which we then had every day. And and then the dancers had to keep up with their reads. So it was difficult. But the most intimidating thing was having Moira come up and talk to you, and you're looking out and it's all of these big producers that I didn't know who they were, and then I Googled them and I was like, why did I Google any of these people? What did I do? John Melfi staring at my face, and I was just like,
It's better if you don't know who
yeah,
they are. And you
I
just
know.
do your work. You just show up and work.
I should never have Googled them.
No, it's okay.
But that was terrifying. And then you have Irina Dvorovenko, who plays Kira, who's incredible. She really was a prima with one of the biggest companies in the U.S. And, and she is a prima. And I was very honored that she would let me go in her group, and she offered me rosin, which, she is one of the kindest human beings. But she really is. She really is. She's a mother, and that she is a mother. She's very maternal and takes care of everyone. Wow. But when it comes to ballet, there is a pecking order, and it was clear that we all respected it in the audition process, and that was scary. And then I had all of these other people staring at me while she's dancing next to me. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I would do it all again, though.
Well, you clearly like it.
I love it.
You've got the bug now.
Yeah, yeah. And I've gotten to play with some non-dancer roles, which have been really fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, so.
Damon, I have to ask you, what's better, working in Australia or working in the U.S.?
Boy, I've got all these Australian friends up the back. That's a bit unfair. No, I actually don't. I genuinely would. I can't answer that question. I think working on anything that's really well written with other great actors and playing a really awesome role is great wherever you get to do it. And I've found that the surprising thing between working in Australia and here is how similar they are, not how different they are. You guys have better catering, I got to say that. You got really a lot of food on set here. We don't have craft service. There's no donuts sitting around all day.
Americans like to eat.
Yeah.
You should know that about us.
But yeah, I mean, obviously the budgets are bigger here. So when you walk onto a set, it's kind of mind-blowing, the stuff that gets built for one scene. And yeah, lots of food. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. Yeah.
That's the best summation I've heard in a while. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here. Damon Herriman, Raychel, Diane, Weiner. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed it.